This video is brought to you by Audible. Go to audibletrial.com/halocanon for a 30-day free trial and a free credit on an audiobook download. Stay tuned for more details. Hey there, Canonites, welcome back. It's been more than a few months since Halo Battleborn Meridian Divide released. This was supposed to happen much sooner, but various circumstances and the sheer magnitude of book reviews like this have kept me held up. I hope you can forgive me. But we're here now, so let's talk about it. If you still haven't read this book and don't want spoilers, I made a spoiler-free review back in October when the book actually came out. A link to that can be found at the eye icon at the top right of the video screen or in the description box below. From here on out, it's full spoilers ahead, so you've been warned. This is Halo Battleborn Meridian Divide. Our story begins 3 months after the end of Battleborn, in the middle of a rather intense game of Capture the Flag on a moon of Hestia 5, the same planet that Meridian orbits. In the game, Evie is the flag, and Victor, Dorian, and Saskia have to capture her while being overseen by an AI named Orvo. Many of their initial plans fail, but Victor eventually figures out that the key is to compare maps, Evie having her own and Victor, Dorian, and Saskia having one. As it turns out, the maps are nearly the same. Evie isn't far away, she's directly under them. After a bit of searching, the team finds the entrance guarded by a reprogrammed locust, which, that's new, didn't realize the UNSC was capable of doing that, but okay. In the underground bunker, similar to the secret room that was under Saskia's house, they find Evie, after which they're sent to be debriefed by Commander Pereira. We skip forward a bit to Evie checking her messages, where we learn that her father and other Meridian survivors have been resettled on another colony about 3 weeks away. The relatives of our teen protagonists, of course, getting extra special treatment in exchange for the kids putting their lives on the line. A message from Evie's mother also notes that their training seems to be going fairly fast. A couple hours later, Evie meets up with Dorian for cleaning duty, but they're soon interrupted and called to meet with Captain Daniel Delator, whom you may remember as the Oni officer that made the offer to work for Oni at the end of Battleborn. Once everyone is gathered, Captain Delator explains that they have an opening that may close at any time, an opening to get the teens onto Meridian to monitor the Covenant's search for forerunner artifacts on the planet, during which they'll be working with the Meridian Militia. Dorian is skeptical of whether they're ready, but seems to accept the situation when Delator explains that their primary role is being familiar with the area, and notes that they'll ship out the next day. Right away in these initial chapters, we get back into what endeared me and many others to the Battleborn series, the civilian perspective. Again, it's something that rarely comes up in Halo media, so when it does, it's often a welcome change of pace. In the wake of the events of Battleborn, even with Victor, Evie, Dorian, and Saskia being trained by the UNSC, they aren't quite soldiers yet. Moreover, we get insights into the universe like we did in Battleborn, such as when Dorian and Evie are discussing their favorite bands and music. We also get to see how the battle on Meridian has affected them, with Dorian often concentrating on his Uncle Max and nephew Remy being alive to keep his mind off his dead friends, or Saskia leaving the room she shares with Evie whenever Evie gets messages from her parents. 3 months on and Saskia still hasn't heard from hers, often secretly sending messages in the night hoping to hear from them. It's beautiful from a narrative perspective and absolutely heartbreaking from a character perspective. The next morning, the teens deploy for Meridian, but it's still an active war zone and their transport is hit and they're forced to make their way to the surface via drop pods, the same kind ODSTs use, and seemingly the same model we see from Halo 2 rather than the more commonly depicted Halo 3 ODST version. It's as jarring an experience as you would expect, but once on the ground, the teens regroup outside Broom-sur-Mer, running into Owen along the way. And pausing once again, the way Owen makes his entrance is rather odd, let's say. From the cover, we know that Owen is sporting a new look, in likeness with his appearance as seen in Outpost Discovery. That alone isn't all that bad. While he looks like he's wearing Mark V, it would still be Mark IV since we're still somewhere in 2548/49, or so it seems. With the canonization of the Mark IV B platform some years ago, armor configurations like we see on the cover aren't impossible. What does stand out though is the inclusion of a photoreactive coating on Owen's Mjolnir. That's a feature that's normally been exclusive to spy armor, the base armor worn by most Spartan 3s. When I initially started writing this, I'd hoped we'd get an explanation on that as the book went on, but we never did, so That's going to need some explaining at some point, 343. Anyway, though, once at the camp, the team is quickly introduced to the leader of the operation, Commander Marichal, shown where they'll be camped, then given 5 minutes to stow their stuff before they have to attend a briefing. At said briefing, the teens are introduced to the rest of the militia, and all are briefed on the Covenant's goal in Broom-sur-Mer. The Covenant are looking for a forerunner artifact. The militia's job is to find it first, the teens acting as guides. They'll search using the tunnels under the town, which the Covenant haven't been monitoring following a full sweep 3 months ago. As the briefing wraps up, Owen announces that the first recon mission will be leaving in 2 hours, a team of 4 militia people with Saskia as their guide. Following Saskia's recon mission, during which they successfully find a service tunnel into the tourist district, Victor goes in with another team to more thoroughly explore the tunnels and see how close to the dig site they can get. The group quickly finds exactly what they're looking for as the sounds of a plasma drill can be heard nearby. Suddenly, the drilling sound changes, indicating the Covenant have switched to more precise tools, meaning they might have found something. Throughout their training, Victor had become much more gung-ho about returning to Meridian and sticking it to the Covenant, constantly wanting to get into a fight to kill them. It is this attitude that encourages him to suggest returning to the surface to try and glimpse what the Covenant may have found. The group leader, Mousseau, is reluctant but ultimately agrees, sending another militiaman, Valois, with Victor. On the surface, Victor finds elites, brutes, and grunts at the site as a Type 47A scarab, the kind from Halo 2, excavates. The grunts are visibly celebrating, meaning the Covenant have found something and the militia needs to act fast. After another recon mission, Commander Marshall briefs the full militia on a plan to sabotage the drill site, possibly even removing the artifact they're digging up. The plan will involve 2 squadrons, blue and green, keeping the Covenant off the main squad's back and providing backup. The main squad local is Owen, Victor, Dorian, Saskia, and Evie. And right here I need to pause for a moment. Up to this point, as brief as it's been, it seemed like Owen was less than eager to see these kids on the battlefield, even saying, "Haven't you had enough of that?" when Victor directly asked to be part of the action earlier. But all of a sudden, he's cool with dragging these kids back into battle? I don't care that some of them are eager for it, I don't care that they've successfully been on the battlefield before, it just seems like an about face from earlier actions Owen has taken. Anyway though, in the command tent, Owen briefs the teens on the plan. Using the same basic plan they had used against a locust months earlier, they'll use a type of explosive called a skinner to disable the scarab and then try to retrieve the artifact. Owen shows them how to set the explosive, then at nightfall, they move out. With blue and green squads drawing the Covenant's attention, local team is able to approach the drill site. Interestingly, Owen notes that it's odd to see a scarab used to excavate, saying that they're usually used to level cities. The interesting thing is that scarabs are actually meant as excavation platforms first. The Covenant just happened to use them as mobile assault platforms. So I guess the UNSC rarely saw scarabs for their intended purpose. Upon arriving at the drill site, the team places the skinners, 8 in total, around an energy shield that's protecting the site and activates the timers. They run for cover as they're shot at by grunts, then detonate the explosives. Not only are these enough to take out the shield, but they also disable the scarab, which I admit feels a bit odd. Again, this is a Type 47A, the kind from Halo 2. And I think we all remember what the Marines said about the scarab in that game.
It blew right through us. 50 cal, rockets, didn't do a thing.
In the book's defense, though, the scarab here is stationary rather than on the move, and the book makes a point about the power of these Skinner explosives. The things are powerful enough to severely damage the tunnels for quite a distance, so maybe it's not as odd as I'm thinking. In addition, the Halo 2 clip just talks about 50 caliber rounds and rockets, which are pretty weak by comparison to these Skinner explosives. What really does bother me, though, is that these explosives broke through an energy shield and damaged or crippled the scarab. Whatever the case, though, after the explosion, the team retreats into the tunnels and heads for camp. Everyone goes their separate ways for a while, Victor napping, Evie and Dorian joining another patrol, leaving Saskia alone. Throughout the book so far, it's been clear that her parents' leaving has weighed on her, and in this moment of reprieve, it continues to do so. So, she seeks out Owen and they talk for a bit. It's a wonderfully human moment from Owen as they discuss Oni, Owen's training, and even the prospect of being sent back to your homeworld. As we learn, Owen was eventually sent back to Jericho 7, the planet he was orphaned on, as a Spartan. Being a Spartan, though, any issues he might have had with going back and any trauma it might have brought on was, quote, trained out of him. Later, during the night, Saskia and the others are awoken by the sound of a siren as the camp comes under attack by the Covenant. The militia scatters, heading straight into the forests, others, such as Victor, fighting before pulling back. They all eventually meet at a predetermined rendezvous, where we find that 3 troops have been killed and another 10 are missing. Their mission now is to steal the artifact from under the Covenant's nose, a mission local team will be cut out of. Victor is annoyed for the reasons we'd expect, but we find Dorian trying to think of a way to secure the artifact using the service tunnels. The reason being, he wants to have some leverage to ensure Oni gets them off Meridian, but he keeps this to himself. With Evie's help, the two contact Salome, Broomsmer's version of the Superintendent, and use her to scout out the service tunnels around the artifact. They find a place where they'd be easily able to extract it and bring their plan to Owen. He's reluctant at first, but ultimately agrees to the plan, provided they understand the dangers the tunnels and the Covenant can pose, and promise not to extract the artifact unless ordered to do so. Under the cover of rain, much like they'd done during the initial invasion of Broomsmer, local team makes for the service tunnels, while the main militia force encircles the Covenant position. The militia slowly move in, taking out Covenant one by one until they reach the artifact site. Local team, of course, will be right beneath them. The teens encounter a single grunt along their way in the tunnels, but take it out quickly and enter. Beneath the city, the team makes their way to the artifact through the severely damaged tunnels. As they near the artifact, they receive a call from Owen saying the militia can't get close enough before he's cut off. It's up to local team now. They manage to find their way to the artifact, which had sunk deeper into the tunnels after the explosives they'd set off before. Wedged into the wall, they manage to free it and find their way into the shelter tunnels, which are more reinforced and thus far less dangerous. Once in there, they receive orders to head to the new campsite. On the way back, they decide to take turns carrying the Forerunner artifact to minimize exposure, unsure of what it might do to them, if anything. Eventually, they make their way back to the camp, many of the surviving militia covered in Medigel for their various injuries, and hand the artifact to Owen. Owen informs the group that 70% of the militia was lost during the attack, and that Oni wouldn't be able to pick them up anytime soon. The Covenant presence in Broomsmer and Meridian at large was stronger than expected, and their orbital presence means extraction is impossible for now. With little else to do, Evie convinces Owen to let her examine the artifact, hoping to find something useful to Oni or useful to them. Eventually, she's able to produce a map of Hestia 5 and Meridian with a point of light pointing to a place called Annecy. After informing Oni, the militia is ordered to depart for Demare, where they'll board an in-atmo cargo freighter which will escort them to Annecy. They manage to make it to the freighter, though Commander Marshall dies in an ambush along the way. As they make their way to Annecy, Dorian begins to think about what has happened, how he'd agreed to return to Meridian because of the mission in Broomsmer, and only that. As we know from Battleborn, he'd always been the one that was a little more anti-UNSC compared to the others of local team. But he realizes after a conversation with Owen that the war just isn't that simple. It really hits him that they are fighting for the survival of the human species, that his Uncle Max and nephew Remy will never be safe while the Covenant is around. Moreover, he realizes that his parents leaving to join the UNSC, something he had always been fairly angry about, may have just been a sacrifice to protect him. It doesn't take long for the militia to arrive in Annecy, and as they make their way through the destroyed city, we learn that it had been hit 6 months prior by the Covenant, meaning the fighting on and above Meridian had been going on for much longer than Owen had originally said. The next morning, the teens confront Owen, who explains that he had lied not only because the invasion was classified, but because he knew what happens when people panic, especially since there was, and generally still is, little to be done. What I found really interesting during this section are the parallels to the current lore surrounding the fall of Reach, that Oni kept the invasion secret for almost a month from most of the planet and even the UNSC at large. Since the release of Halo Reach, this detail in particular has been a point of criticism among fans, and odd as it may sound, Meridian Divide makes a pretty convincing case for why Oni might do this. Owen talks about how chaotic a planetary evacuation can be, especially with Covenant forces in orbit. More specifically, he talks about how he had witnessed firsthand the Covenant using evac ships as, quote, target practice, and wraps up by noting that the best chance the remaining people of Meridian currently have is remaining in ignorance while the military does its job. Though angry over being lied to, Evie, Saskia, and Victor are able to join Owen as they head out into the ruins of Annecy. Dorian, taking this a lot harder than the rest of the team, goes off with Green Squad to scavenge supplies. Finding a warthog, they make it to the site Oni believes holds the artifact the one from Broom-sur-Mer had pointed to. Upon arriving, they note strange activity from the Broom-sur-Mer artifact and find the Covenant had found the location of the Annecy artifact already. However, there's no drilling platforms, barely any Covenant presence, and an energy shield covers the drill hole previously dug. For some reason, the Covenant couldn't extract their prize. Before the team can do much more though, they come under attack and have to retreat into what remains of the city to try and lose their pursuers. Interesting to note, the attackers, brutes, are firing weapons said to send out what's described as reddish plasma bolts. I wonder if that's meant to imply these brutes are using brute plasma rifles already? Seems a bit early given what we know about it, but anyway. Eventually the teens lose the brutes, getting separated from Owen along the way, and manage to find their way back to camp. During that time, they realize that whatever the artifact under Annecy is, it's something that can't be moved, hence the light guards. So they decide to take the Broom-sur-Mer artifact back to the Annecy site and see if they can't figure out what's underground. It takes some convincing, but Owen agrees on the condition that Eliso Farhi, the commander of the militia now that Marshall is dead, joins them. Saskia decides to stay at the camp so that at least one of them is aware of the larger plans, while Evie, Victor, and Farhi return to the dig site. Upon confirming that there are no Covenant in the immediate area, they pull out the artifact and start to head in. Much like before, the artifact is pulled towards the entrance the energy shield is covering, Evie being dragged with it. She lets go just before it impacts the shield, releasing a blinding light and force. The team returns to the campsite before the Covenant show up. While Evie and Victor work with the rest of the militia on a plan to take the artifact, Saskia talks with Dorian. It takes some convincing, but she manages to get Dorian to agree to help them with the mission. Not for Owen, not for the UNSC or Oni, but for her, Victor, and Evie. For his new family. Once again returning to the dig site, the militia are confronted with a stronger Covenant air presence and, surprise surprise, a San Shayun prophet. However, they still need to do their job, and it's decided that local team and Owen will make for the artifact entrance while the remaining militia draw the Covenant's attention and thins them out. The plan is executed and works like a charm, the Broom-sur-Mer artifact pulling local team into the forerunner structure like it had tried to do to Evie before, Owen following just behind. The energy shield opens to allow the team in and closes behind them, working as one might expect. For humans, but not for Covenant. Inside they find a hole, glowing with the same light as the Broom-sur-Mer artifact, but not in the same shape. A quick bit of messing with the artifact by Evie like she'd done before causes it to transform, now a perfect fit for the hole. She slides the artifact in and immediately the group basically goes on the worst acid trip ever. Owen, seemingly unaffected by whatever was going on, manages to pull the artifact out and evacuate local team, all of whom are now weak and seemingly sick. 3 hours later, the militia is back at the camp and local team, still feeling sickly, meet with Owen to debrief Oni, represented as usual by Captain Delator. The teens relate their experiences, discovering that Owen saw the distortions of reality too, but wasn't made sick by them. They ultimately come to the conclusion that the structure seems to be some kind of containment area, and that whatever had happened was due to some kind of interaction with slipspace. Delator orders Owen to retrieve a part of the structure's wall and bring it, along with the Broom-sur-Mer artifact, to Oni for study, and says that the militia will be extracted in 3 days. With that, they're dismissed. Afterwards, the militia comes up with a plan of attack, settling on creating a fire and smoke screen to limit Covenant visibility and allow local team and Owen into the dig site. Then they use whatever they've scavenged to try and extract a piece of the structure. But we all know how best laid plans go. To start, the Oni extraction comes 2 days early, forcing the militia to move up their plans. Second, when extracting the plan, the fire quickly goes out of control thanks to this foamy white substance that had been found all over the Covenant dig site. Whatever it is extremely flammable. Still, the team presses on. Victor takes some fire suppressant and makes a path to the forerunner structure, allowing Evie, Dorian, Saskia, and Owen to get in. They manage to secure a piece of it, a small statue of sorts that can be disconnected with a little application of Spartan strength, and then get out. They grab a now badly burned Victor and head for the evac site with the rest of the militia. Days later at Tomi Base, Victor is in a healing tank and Saskia is racked with guilt, feeling like it should be her in there. She had originally wanted to lay down the suppressant, feeling that as she didn't have any family to worry about her, she was the one to sacrifice if a sacrifice needed to be made. But Victor had taken the suppressant and was now covered in burns. Perhaps worse, none of local team have been allowed to see him, and they all worry about what Oni could be doing. 2 days after that, the group is called in by Captain Delator and fully briefed on the situation. Not just Victor's, but their own. Whatever had happened in the forerunner structure under Annecy had affected them on a genetic level, seemingly wiping out their immune system. As such, Victor isn't responding to treatment. However, Owen was unaffected, seemingly because of his Spartan augmentations. As such, Oni wants to try a new line of procedures on the teens to save their life. Indeed, they are being offered the chance to become the first wave of the next generation of Spartans, and ultimately, they agree. And that's Halo Battleborn Meridian Divide, and okay, first things first, we need to talk about this ending. When the official Spartan Field Manual released back in 2018, we learned that Oni had been developing the Spartan 4 program since around 2550 as a way of adding limited augmentation to Oni Special Forces operators. Given that the book was published by Scholastic as well, it seems obvious in hindsight that this was to prime fans for the new direction in Meridian Divide. So we know that Saskia, Evie, Victor, and Dorian are going to be augmented, but the ultimate question is just how much, and how effective these augmentations are is going to make or break this story decision. Some people have their minds made up, but for me at the moment, I need to see how this plays out. Generally speaking, I'm not a fan of this augmentation thing. It seems a bit contrived. I can accept it so long as we aren't talking about these teens going full on Spartan 4 right out the gate. If we're talking enhancements on the level of the original Orion operators or the Spartan 1.1s, more than human but not really Spartan 2 or 3 level, I think that would be acceptable. Not ideal, but acceptable. Certainly I don't think I could stomach them being issued Mjolnir armor right off the bat. Still, one thing I do love about these books is the focus on regular people managing to do extraordinary things despite the overwhelming forces against them. I worry that feeling will be lost if these teens are going to become Spartans on any level. Ultimately, though, we have to wait and see. One thing I have to bring up, though, is that these augmentations shift when these books seem to be set. As stated, the Spartan 4 program formally began in 2550. Throughout the books, Owen notes that the war has been going on for 25 years. That would seem to suggest that Meridian Divide, at least, is set in 2550. However, Meridian first came under attack in 2548. Even though we learned that the planet had been under attack for 3 months prior to the invasion of Broom-sur-Mer, the timeline seems kinda wonky. Either there were earlier skirmishes in 2548 that were also kept secret and the Covenant returned in late 2549 with a stronger force, or the main characters are getting augmented in 2549 prior to the formal start of the program. Hopefully the next book in the series or some other source can clear this up. As for the rest of the book, well, if you've seen my spoiler-free review, you know where I stand. I think Battleborn was better, but this book is far from bad. The main characters are still a joy, and I loved any time we got into Saskia's head in particular. Her along with Evie are the standout characters in this series so far. Owen continues to be fun, but there are moments when he makes questionable decisions, moments when he seems to go against the rest of his characterization. Luckily, they're few and far between. The Meridian Militia was an absolute treat that, if I had any major criticism, only felt a little underutilized. The moments we got with them are great, but understandably, they always felt overshadowed by the main characters to the detriment of the story. Not severely, but at least a little. Ultimately, I can't say that my feelings on the story have changed much since October. Meridian Divide remains a good read at 7.5 out of 10, at least for now. As I think I've made clear, depending on how this augmentation storyline is handled, that could drag down this book and the entire Battleborn series. Fingers crossed that whatever comes next sticks the landing. That's it for Meridian Divide, but what did you think? Let me know in the comments below. Thanks for watching, and until next time, this has been Halo Canon. Thanks for watching. If you enjoy this, be sure to check out Audible. By going to audibletrial.com/halocanon, you can get a 30-day free trial and a free audiobook. Audible's selection is unmatched and includes all the Halo novels. You can cancel at any time and keep any audiobooks you've purchased. So check out audibletrial.com/halocanon today.